And the Mets lost and are back in fourth place in the National League East as the Nationals won. This is going to be one of the more infuriating losses for me as a Mets fan because the Mets really had a chance to solidify themselves for the playoffs. They had an opportunity if they won. They'd only be one game below 500 at 36 and 37. They'd be in a playoff spot. Instead, they choked the game away to the Texas Rangers. Carlos Mendoza made some absolute horrible decisions. Throughout the game. And there were just some really I can't seem to find it, but there was just some really questionable decisions made in this game by Carlos Mendoza. This is one of those games I think Carlos Mendoza badly mismanaged the bullpen, and this is the reason why I want Carlos Mendoza fired. Because if you look at his horrible May, many of those games were because Carlos Mendoza mismanaged the bullpen. Now, obviously, the Mets have had significant improvement as they won their previous 7 games before that. And it was 7-0 ever since Grimace threw the first pitch. That being said, it appears that that this could be ending. As we remember in April, after the Mets started off with 0 wins through their first 5 games, the Mets went on a hot streak. The Mets proceeded to win 12 out of the next 15 games. But then they got smacked by the Dodgers. And everyone thought that loss, that everything would be fine. And then the Mets proceeded to go on a horrible tear after that. There was only one instance in this entire streak that went all the way to the end of May where the Mets managed to win back-to-back games or win a series. It was abysmal how bad the Mets were doing in this stretch. I mean, they were just not winning games. They were getting swept. They were losing in a really horrendous fashion. Everything was going bad. This was a game in which Carlos Mendoza badly mismanaged the bullpen. This game especially, he badly mismanaged the bullpen. Carlos Mendoza also badly mismanaged the bullpen in these 2 games. And this game also. Eventually, the Mets began to sort of get their shit together, though this is another game in which Carlos Mendoza badly mismanaged the bullpen. And again, they seem to be doing really good. But they just took a loss that they really cannot afford to take given the state of the playoff race right now. So, looking at everything, we have to look at how the Mets have been doing. Because even though they start off 0-5, they got themselves up to 12-8. Look at how much green you see in this area right here. They won 5 series in a row against teams that, at least when they played them, were actually pretty good teams. They won 5 series in a row. They won the series against the Reds, against the Braves, against the Royals. They swept the Pirates, and they won the series against the Dodgers. But then the tear happened, and they began to get worse, as you can see with all this red and how little green you see at this point. So, during a stretch, they won a series against the Cardinals. We aren't going to know if that series ended in a sweep until August 5th because that game has to be made up. So, if, when that game gets made up, we'll actually see what happens. And yes, I get that they split with the Cubs and they split with the Diamondbacks, but they just did not play good baseball. Now, they did sweep the Nationals. They did split with the Phillies in London, which is actually pretty good considering the Phillies are the best team in the National League right now, and I hate them. They beat the Marlins, swept the Padres. They did beat the Rangers in the series, but the Rangers are a pretty bad team. And there's still a lot to be uncomfortable about with this. because even though the Mets have gotten better, they actually went 11-3 ever since they split to the Diamondbacks, and 13-5 in the last 18 games. There's still a lot to be desired. So, looking at some more important Mets statistics. Right now, the Mets are now they're a game out of the wild card spot, and they've also slid down to fourth to last in the entire National League, even though they're only a game out. If they had won, I kid you not, they'd literally be up here. They had the tiebreak over the Nationals and the Cardinals. They'd be in a second wild card spot if they won. I'm not even joking. If they were 36 and 37, they would literally be in that spot. Now they're a game out, and they don't have a tiebreaker against the Giants or the Cubs. In case you're wondering, the Cubs beat so far the tiebreaker of the Giants. The Cubs and Mets, their tiebreaker is currently split, so I don't know what that would come down to. The Giants will own the tiebreaker over the Mets for the season. That was already determined. Also, they'd be ahead of the Mets because they're 36 and 39, while the Mets are 35 and 38, but that's a little bit different. So you have the Marlins and Rockies who are out of it. The Reds are only a game and a half out. So the Mets are a game out. So are the Giants and Cubs. Pirates, Diamondbacks, and Padres are half a game out. And right now, we have the Braves obviously in the fourth wild card spot, and the Cardinals taking wild card 2, and the Nationals taking wild card 3. It's jam packed right now, and it's also pretty bad. There are sub 500 teams that will be getting a second wild card spot. The season ended today, and considering that the Mets could have literally been that team, it's annoying. Like it's really just annoying. Now there's this Wikipedia grid. I want to see if that's accurate. It's not. There are some things that do need to be Wait, this. Yeah, there's some stuff in this that. Yeah, this only goes to May 31st. Like, looking at this, the Mets right now are 2-2 against the Diamondbacks. They play again. Obviously, the winner of that series is going to win a tiebreaker. Versus Atlanta, they're 3-3. So, again, if the Braves continue to fall off and the Mets can, resurrect themselves, this tiebreaker could become relevant. But there's still a lot of baseball to be played. Cubs, they're 2-2. So again, one of that next year is going to get in. Against the Reds, they're 2-1. I don't know when the next Mets versus Reds series is. Right now, Mets versus Reds. Okay, they play in September. So the Mets need to win at least one of those games, but probably 2 to have the tiebreaker. Otherwise, it's very up in the air kind of stuff. Versus the Dodgers, they did lose that. They were 2-4. A series win in April, counteracted by a sweep in May. They're 3-3 against the Marlins, which is really embarrassing. They're 3-3 against the Marlins. I don't see it being relevant, but the fact that they're currently tied with the Marlins in the head-to-head series record is embarrassing. They're 0-3 against the Brewers, so I really can't. The Brewers are pretty comfortably leading the NL Central right now. But even if it's in a sweep, it's not going to guarantee the tiebreaker. 2-4 against the Phillies, that's going to become relevant, but just in case it does. They are 3-0 versus the Pirates and versus the Padres. Looking at Mets versus Padres, they play again in August. Looking at Mets versus Padres, August, they play 4 games. So the Mets do need to win one of the series to secure the secure the series. Against the Pirates, the Mets play 4 games in July. So again, they do need to win at least one of those games to secure the series win. can't afford a sweep. They're 2-4 against the Giants. They will lose that tiebreaker. West they lose 3-2, so they will at least have a tie, in which case it gets complicated. But if they win the series outright. Against the Nationals, currently 3-0, and they're 5-10 against the American League. Which I was a little bit surprised they were that poor against them, but yeah. Looking at the Mets' upcoming schedule, it's one where they have very winnable games. I will say that they have a lot of very winnable games, but you have to consider that a lot of these teams are about the same talent level as the Mets. So the Mets, they play 3 games against the Cubs. Again, this is a series that the Mets should be able to win to boost their momentum. But so should the Cubs. Now the Cubs are my second favorite team, but this is one instance where I will be cheering against the Chicago Cubs. And I'll just hope they can make ground elsewhere because I do need the Mets to win the series. And the Cubs have also kind of suffered a bit of an implosion, sort of how we saw the Mets implode in, earlier on, and the Cubs choked everything away last season too. And we saw how the Cubs were doing really well. They were actually, at 24-17. Then they began to go on a bit of a tear themselves. So after a pretty good April and a pretty good start to May, everything became a lot choppier for the Cubs. They fell into a massive losing streak. They fell below 500 by the end of the month, and they got back to 500. Now they're back to, being well under. But they did win their last 2 games. They did win the series against the Giants. That was their first series win since they swept the White Sox in June, early June. And again, that's against the Chicago White Sox. That's against a team that's 20-55, and the season is pretty much over. Now the Yankees. The Yankees are as much as I like to consider the Yankees to be fraudulent, they are a really good team right now. And yes, the Yankees did suffer an embarrassing loss to Baltimore, but they're still 51-25. And even though I like to think of them as fraudulent, are they better than the Mets? Probably. I mean, they are just number 1 in the entire American League right now. So the Yankees are a team that I really think the Mets can win at most 1 game from the Yankees. Against the Houston Astros, a team that's currently 34-40. Again, should be a very winnable series. Then they play the Nationals, 36-37, only a game ahead. I think that the Mets might be able to win the series. Then the Pirates, a very winnable series. The Nationals, again, a very winnable series. And then they play the Rockies and then the Marlins. But we know how the Marlins always play the Mets tough and always make the Mets' lives difficult. So that could be a surprisingly tough series, despite a team that's 25-49. They're still playing like they have a chance. And the Rockies are 26-48. But again, we saw it happen in the Cubs collapse, how they actually lost 2 games to the Rockies when they should have won like all 6 of them. The Yankees, then the Mets play them again late in July. And again, I think that of the 4 games in the Subway Series, the Mets only win 1. And then their schedule's going to become a lot harder with the Braves and then the Twins, and it's going to become a lot tougher as the season goes on. The Mets do have a tough end to their schedule. So it's important that the Mets gain ground now because, as you can see, this is a team that has the talent of a playoff team, but poor management is holding them back. The Mets are a team that, really, considering how unstable everything is with the Mets franchise, they should be making the playoffs. The Mets are not a team where you could just look at them and say, okay, they didn't make the playoffs, but they could still improve, because as a Mets fan, that's never happened. Everyone thought that the 2019, when they went 86-76 and almost made the playoffs. And then guess what? They finished last place in the division in 2020. First time since 2003 that the Mets actually finished last in the division. So, that sucked. Everyone thought after the 2022 implosion, the wild card round of the Mets would finally be able to to improve on that in 2023. They completely imploded. The Mets just can't ever carry momentum going forward. So it's important to make the playoffs this season, because if they don't, there might be a wasted opportunity. And I think that these Mets can make the playoffs, but it's not going to be an easy fight. They have a lot of tough teams coming up, and they really can't afford to take a loss like this.